Okay. Good morning to everybody tuning in from Vietnam and across Asia. And good evening to those who are joining us from Canada. My name is Zach Rivers. I'm the Executive Director with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam. I'd like to welcome you to Advantage Vietnam. This webinar is focused on promoting and discussing the advantages of Vietnam's startup ecosystem and emerging industries. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our national corporate sponsors, CN, GeoComply, Manulife, Sun Life, Vina Capital, KPMG, and Telec and Gibbons, as well as our many co-hosts who've helped to share and promote this webinar across their networks, including the Vietnam Trade Office in Ottawa, the Canada-Vietnam Trade Society, the Canada-ASEAN Business Council, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Hong Kong, the Council of Taiwanese Chambers in Vietnam, the Singapore Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam, the Malaysia Business Chamber of Vietnam, Indian Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam, as well as anybody else who's helped to share this. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to Leaps and Bounds Consulting for sponsoring today's webinar. We couldn't do it without your support, so we're very appreciative of that, Vish. So today we'll hear from three speakers to highlight the potential and importance of the burgeoning economy of Vietnam for the global business community. We will look into emerging industries, which are in a nascent stage and carrying a lot of room for investors to explore and jump into, with a lot of opportunity right now for first mover advantage. So I think just in quick summary, Vietnam is now the home of 4 unicorns. And this is just the beginning, with Ho Chi Minh City in particular now being commonly referred to as the growing and emerging startup hub of Southeast Asia. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us and for sharing your interest in this topic as we look for insights into the startup ecosystem of Vietnam and how it is so conducive for people with entrepreneurial minds. So following today's presentations, we will open the floor to a Q&A. So if you have any questions at any time, just please enter them into the Q&A box. We'll get to them all after or following the presentation. So with that, we'll begin. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Vishwas Saraswat, the founder and CEO of Leaps and Bounds Consulting. Vish is a young and energetic professional, having 12 plus years of work experience in India, Singapore, and Vietnam. He's an MBA graduate from NMIMS Mumbai, India, and has moved to Vietnam in 2017 from Singapore, where he founded Leaps and Bounds Consulting. He's also on the board of directors for the Indian Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam, and is also a fitness freak and avid reader. So Vish, I'll turn it over to you to kick things off.
Thank you so much, Zach, and good morning to everyone. And well, guys, the thing is, the reason why I wanted to have this event, because as we all know that Vietnam has proved its mettle for manufacturing industry. But then we thought, what is beyond manufacturing which Vietnam can offer to the investors at the global level? So we thought of talking about at least 2 emerging industries, which I'll be covering in my presentation. So can I share my screen, Zach? Okay, just one sec, please. Can you guys see my screen? All right. Yeah, wait just one sec. Yeah. So again, good morning, everyone. This is Vishwas. You can call me Vish. I'm from the Leaps and Bounds Consulting. We are a new market advisory based out of Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and we have been helping our investors to do business in Vietnam across all the industries. So in today's presentation, I'll be covering only 3 topics. One is about Vietnam in a very specific terms, then about Vietnam key economic highlights, and also the 2 biggest emerging industries in Vietnam. One is fintech, and second is the electric two-wheeler market. Because of the paucity of the time, I can't talk much about it, but I'm happy to discuss one-to-one post-event. So let's begin with about Vietnam. See, as we all know, Vietnam is a pretty growing country in terms of the GDP. Vietnam has a population of around 98 million, and Vietnam has more females than men. Vietnam also sharing a land border with 3 countries: China, which is here up north, then Laos, which is here up west, and also Cambodia, which is somewhere here. And one of the biggest advantage of Vietnam is that Vietnam has a very huge coastal line, all this east side, which you can see in my cursor. This is actually, we call East Vietnam Sea. And this is also one of the biggest advantage of Vietnamese manufacturing industries because it actually boosts a lot of supply chain activities because of the huge coastal line. And Vietnam actually known for tourism, coffee production, and also manufacturing. In fact, before pandemic in 2019, the tourism actually gave around 9.2% of the country's GDP, which is a huge thing. And a lot of Russian, Chinese, Korean, Singaporean, European people, they normally come to Vietnam and spend at least a month or 2 months in terms of long vacation. And Vietnam is also pretty strong into manufacturing of coffee production. There are two countries which are pretty good into coffee production. One is Brazil, and second is Vietnam. But Brazil is more into the Arabica coffee, whereas Vietnam is more into the Robusta coffee. And in fact, in 2022, last year, I think Vietnam actually exported around close to 1.4 million of coffee production export across the world. And as we all know that owing to US-China trade war and also the pandemic and all, there's a new term called China plus one strategy. And guys, Vietnam is the perfect place in this strategy because of the location, because Vietnam is neighboring to China. And also a lot of companies have been shifting their manufacturing facilities from China into Vietnam or expanding their facilities instead of China, they are moving towards the Vietnam. So Vietnam is a country which has got absolutely perfect place under this strategy called China plus one. And China and US are the biggest trading partner of Vietnam. In terms of import, China is number one, which is around close to $100 billion imports, which Vietnam does with China every year. And the US export is around close to $93 billion. The next is the very key economic highlights of Vietnam. As we all know that this world is full of issues these days. But despite all the issues, Vietnam has been growing a lot. And as per the Vietnam General Statistics Office, 8.2% of the GDP of Vietnam, which Vietnam is pretty much growing at this speed. And in fact, all the major bodies like World Bank, UOB Bank, HSBC Bank, they all are pretty much optimistic about Vietnam GDP. And they all are saying that Vietnam definitely will grow more than 7% for sure. And in terms of the nominal GDP, Vietnam is among the top 40 countries. And inflation is something which is majority of the country fighting these days, especially US, Russia, Pakistan, China, and all the countries. But Vietnam has been managing inflation in a very good way, which is below than 5%. And one of the beautiful things about Vietnam economy is that Vietnam has an open economy. And Vietnam always welcome FDI. And last year, Vietnam has received around $22 billion FDI. This is as per the Ministry of Planning and Investments. And guys, majority of the FDI goes into the two sectors. One is manufacturing and second is construction. In terms of the trade value, last year, Vietnam has done the trade of around close to $700 billion. And that is, guys, despite having issues like pandemic, issues like Russia and Ukraine conflict, and also other global issues. Despite all the so-called global political conundrums, Vietnam was able to achieve this much trade value. And Vietnam is having a trade surplus of around $9 billion. And the last thing is that Vietnam also pretty good in terms of the GDP per capita income, which is around USD 3900. That shows that the Vietnamese has a good lifestyle. They can spend more money into the basic amenities like housing, hospitals, healthcare, and other amenities. And in terms of global innovation index, Vietnam is pretty much among the top 50. And especially in the Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, a lot of young Vietnamese are actually having a lot of innovative mind. They're trying to get more ideas. They're trying to become, they're trying to start their own venture in terms of the different verticals. So Vietnam is also a very good place in terms of the boosting the innovative ideas. So this is about the very basic thing about Vietnam as a country. Now we'll begin with the Vietnam fintech. This is one of the emerging industry of Vietnam, because I thought that Vietnam could offer more than manufacturing, and fintech is something which has become the global phenomenon. And in Vietnam, we have around close to 250 plus fintech companies as of now. But before I talk about fintech, let's talk about the Vietnam digital economy, because Vietnam digital economy is something which gives the foundation of the fintech industry at the global level. So as per the study done by the Google, Bain and company, and also Temasek, that the Vietnam digital economy contributes around 14.26% of country's GDP. And this is going to be 20% in the next couple of years. This is absolutely at the global level. Because as per the World Bank, 15% or more should be the GDP comes from the digital economy. And this is what Vietnam is also at. At the same time, in terms of the gross merchandise value, Vietnam is going to be around $49 billion by 2025. That shows the robust infrastructure of Vietnam fintech digital economy. And then one thing is that Vietnam is because when I moved to Vietnam almost 5 years ago, I was very surprised because Vietnam has a very strong internet penetration. You go to anywhere in Vietnam, whether it's a coffee shop, whether it's a hospital, bank, you can get very strong Wi-Fi, like very strong Wi-Fi, and that shows the government intent to make this country more digitalized. And that is also gives the very strong foundation of the fintech industry as well, and all the tech industry, in fact. And in terms of the smartphone usage, Vietnam is among top 10 countries. Mobile is absolutely everywhere in Vietnam. Almost all the Vietnamese is having a mobile phone now these days. And that is why the Vietnam digital economy actually grew by 12.3% last year. This is a pretty good growth in terms of this region. And by 2025, as per the Cisco, Vietnam will have around 6.3 million 5G subscribers. That is, again, one of the very leading figure in terms of this region. And one of the very beautiful thing is that among the top 5 fastest growing digital economy in the world, Vietnam is among them, along with India and Indonesia. So that shows the potential, that shows the confidence of Vietnam government in terms of the digital economy. And that gives the very good gateway to the Vietnam fintech industry as well. And that is why for the last almost 4 to 5 years, Vietnam has produced more than 250 fintech industries. And the good thing is that Vietnam actually has been, Vietnam fintech industry has been getting a lot of investments from the investors across the globe. And that's why if you look at this pie chart, fintech is something which has got the majority of the attention of the investors, along with e-commerce, edutech, and then other industry as well. The fintech is the top one. Around 26.6% investment actually had come to Vietnam fintech industry. And also Vietnam, as Zach said, that Vietnam is a home of 4 unicorns, and out of 4 unicorns, 3 belongs to fintech industries. So that again shows the maturity of this industry in Vietnam. And as per one of the studies, Vietnam market in terms of fintech industry is around close to $18 billion. And then this is the typical like phenomena at global level, where the majority of the fintech industry is actually operating into the category of e-wallet and digital payment, along with P2P lending, blockchain, investments, wealth, and other different industries. But this is as per the global level, because if we go to countries like Singapore or India or China, majority of the fintech industries are operating into the e-wallet and digital payment category. These are the a few of the known fintech companies. Names like Momo and VNPay, they are the unicorns of Vietnam. They're into the category of e-wallet and payments, and they are one of the very known name, especially among the youth of Vietnam. And then in terms of the P2P lending, we have companies like Tima, Interloan, and the company called Vinitas from Singapore. They are also operating into the category of SME lending. So these are the one of the important and imperative verticals of fintech industry where investors are showing a lot of interest. And these are the one of the few of the known companies of Vietnam fintech. And then one thing is very important, that if you really want to attract the investors' attention into the Vietnamese fintech industry, we need to have very strong ecosystem. So Vietnam fintech ecosystem has 4 pillars. One is, as I mentioned before, very robust internet penetration, because we cannot do any tech services without having a good internet penetration. So Vietnam has got very strong internet penetration, around close to 70%. And second is, Vietnamese love to use smart devices like smartphone, laptops, or iPads and all. So that's why Vietnam is among the top 10 countries in the world in terms of smartphone usage. And the third pillar is that fintech deals. So the thing is, let me show you this slide. Yeah. So now this shows the confidence of investors into fintech industry of Vietnam. And in 2021, Vietnam fintech actually raised $375 million. And out of that, the majority share went to a company called VinPay, which is a unicorn here, followed by Momos. And then last year, there's one more company called Sky Mavis. It's also one of the unicorns in Vietnam. They're into blockchain. They raised around $150 million. So that shows, guys, that Vietnam has been getting a lot of attention from the investors in terms of the fintech industry. And that also gives the perfect ecosystem for the Vietnam fintech, because if you don't have the investor confidence, if there is no interest from the investor side, then you can't have very strong ecosystem for any industry. And this is the chart which shows that that which stage normally investors show interest into Vietnam's fintech companies. Majority of the investors actually went for Series C or Series D funding, and then followed by Series A and Series B, and then the pre-stage funding. So that is why Vietnam fintech deals is one of the very strong ecosystem of Vietnam fintech industry. And the last pillar is government support, because we can't do anything without the government support at all. That's why the government of Vietnam has been pushing a lot in terms of doing a lot of reforms into Vietnam fintech industry. And that is why in March 2022, the State Bank of Vietnam actually proposed a regulatory sandbox to bring more innovations, creativity, and also to make it more modernization in terms of the fintech industry in Vietnam. And that is why they also launched a pilot project, which consists of all the 6 solutions of fintech industry, like credit scoring, grant of credit, API, P2P lending. But all these things will come with some conditions, especially P2P lending. And one thing is that the State Bank of Vietnam also has been working very closely with the different ministries like finance, public security, information technologies, to make it more organized, to give a proper framework. And that is why Vietnam can probably able to give more confidence to the investors across the globe, and also to the young guys to open their own venture into the Vietnam fintech industry. So these are the 4 pillars of Vietnam ecosystem, and that is why Vietnam such a strong country in terms of the fintech industry, because they have got very strong support from the government, from the investor side, from the ground in terms of the penetration of the internet and also smartphone usage. So this is the ready market for the investor to jump in. But the question is that despite everything, why Vietnam? Like, why do we need Vietnam when we have countries like Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, India, China? Why Vietnam? Now, why Vietnam is because if you look at the first line, that shows that 90% of the transaction actually conducted in cash, and 68% of Vietnam you don't have even bank account. That may sound a bit negative, or that may sound pretty much contradiction towards the fintech industry, but that also shows the potential of the market, because Vietnamese love to deal in cash, and that is when 90% deal normally happens in cash. But that is also the untapped market for the fintech industries. And government has been pushing a lot, especially few provinces of Vietnam. They're trying to convert the cash into the digital banking payment system. And that is where the potential lies in. That 90% of the current transaction happens in absolutely cash, and that is where the investor should come, or companies trying to capture that 90% of the pie chart. And 68% people do not even have bank account, but they do have access to Facebook, they use Instagram, they use YouTube. So that shows that these guys, 68% people of Vietnam, they do not have the bank account, but they are very much into tech. They're very tech savvy. So that shows the potential, also the ready client for using all the tech services. And just 30% of Vietnamese adult use digital banking. And that is also especially in the big cities like Washington City and Hanoi. 70% still not using digital banking. And these 70% belongs to the tier 3 and tier 2 cities of Vietnam. And if we really want to make any country developed country, whether it's Vietnam or Indonesia or India or China or any so-called developing country, we can't make a country as developed without going to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And that is where the opportunity for the companies is, because this 30% also only for the big cities. But the main Vietnam lives in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And that is where the mass is, this is where the population is. And so that shows the potential of the untapped market of Vietnamese. And then, in fact, last year, Vietnam, in fact, crossed the Singapore and Malaysia in terms of the total transaction value of digital payment, which is around $19 billion. That again shows the scope and also the potential of this industry in Asian region, because Singapore, as we all know, is pretty strong into the fintech industry, but Vietnam did surpass Singapore in the last year. And again, as I mentioned before, that 34% of the fintech firms are into the space of digital banking and e-wallet, which is again the highest in the region. But that also shows that that the scope of investors to jump into different categories like P2P lending, blockchain, comparison is one of the very potential area, point of sales, insurance tech. So that shows that except this first category, which is a pretty full of competition, you have everything is still available for the investor to jump in. Okay, because which is like less 20% of the market share. So that shows the potential of the other industries of Vietnam, other services of fintech industry of Vietnam in terms of the investors. And then, as I mentioned before, that Vietnam is in pretty high in terms of the unbanked or underbanked, and also, but at the same time, Vietnam also has very strong population of the mobile user. So that shows that you have people who have got no bank account, but they are very tech savvy. They have got internet. They have got things like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Zalo, and all, WhatsApp, and all. But they're not unbanked. They are not using bank services. But that is where the opportunity comes for the investors. That you can probably bring more innovative product, easy to use, and you can capture this so-called the majority of the untapped market share, which is still the companies trying to capture. Because right now, all the companies are focusing more into the big cities like Hanoi. But guys, trust me, more than Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh, other cities has a huge potential. That is where the majority of the Vietnamese lives in terms of the young guys, and that is where the gives the foundation of the Vietnam economy. So this is about Vietnam fintech industry. I hope that I've cleared some of the information, but I'm happy to discuss more post-event one-to-one, because a paucity of time doesn't allow me to talk everything in detailed way. But I wanted to give you the gist of a glimpse of the Vietnam fintech industry. Moving forward, the next is, this is again one of the very promising industry, electric two-wheelers. Now, before I talk about this segment, I'll talk about Vietnam two-wheeler market first. Guys, trust me, when I moved to Vietnam from Singapore, one of my Vietnamese friends in Singapore told me that, Vish, you're going to Vietnam, you need to get bike. Because in India, we are not using a bike. I never used bike in India. I used my sometime, but in Singapore, I never used bike. But I asked him why I have to use bike. Then he told me that you can't live Vietnam without having a bike. When I say bike means two-wheeler, it could be bike, a scooter, motorbike, could be anything. When I moved to Vietnam, I thought, yes, you can't live in Vietnam without having a two-wheeler. You need to have two-wheeler. It is like a backbone of Vietnamese daily transportation system. And that is why Vietnam is among the top 4 countries in terms of the two-wheeler market. And despite COVID, despite slow economy, still Vietnam sold around 2.6 million two-wheeler product in 2021. This is despite slow economy, lockdown, COVID issues, and a lot of other global problems. And 60% of Vietnamese own two-wheelers. So that shows the potential of this product in this market. And if you come to Vietnam, if you go to cities like Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, or any part of the Vietnam, you can see plethora of bikes on the road. So whether it's a young boy, or old uncle, auntie, a rich man, or poor man, everyone has two-wheeler in Vietnam. Everyone, and they love to ride two-wheeler, and it is very, very convenient, in fact. And that is why the big cities like Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, around 82 to 70% people are using two-wheeler, because you can't live without two-wheeler in Vietnam. It is so convenient, and also because of we do have public buses, we do have metro trains, but not very strong. That is why people are bound to use this two-wheeler. But the thing is, it also shows the potential of this market for this kind of product in Vietnam. But despite, the thing is, this also causes the air pollution. That is why the biggest two cities of Vietnam are having a huge air pollution, because all the people are moving to these big cities for a job or a business. And when they move to big cities, they probably have their two-wheeler, and they have to go to office, they have to go to schools to using their two-wheeler. That's why they also enhance the air pollution in Vietnam. And as we all know that Vietnam is pretty strong with the manufacturing, that also adds the air pollution in Vietnam. And that is why, as per the IQ Air, Vietnam is the 15th most polluted country in the world. And the government of Vietnam actually had commitment as per the COP26 event, which happened in Glasgow in November 2021, where the Vietnam wanted to be a net zero emission by 2050. Because Vietnam's government is trying best to make this country a more developed country, and that is why they need to have a good lifestyle. They need to give good healthy air, and also they need the good infrastructure. And that is why it actually brings the potential of electric two-wheeler market, because of the factors like the thing is, as we all know, that Vietnamese already have the adaptability of this product. So Vietnamese are used to using two-wheelers, right? So any investor or any company, when they want to come to Vietnam to sell their electric two-wheeler, they don't have to convince the Vietnamese in terms of using the product, because their product is already in their mind. Only thing is that they have to convert from the gasoline into the e-bikes. That's all. So you already have a ready client. You already have a ready market. At the same time, Vietnam's government has the agenda of to make this country more developed, and they also want to meet COP26 commitment. That is why all these factors lead to the perfect market for the electric two-wheeler companies in Vietnam. So, talking about the Vietnamese electric two-wheeler market, it is the second largest market in the world after China. And in fact, in 2021, Vietnam sold almost 300,000 electric two-wheeler market bikes in Vietnam, which is almost 10% of the world sales. So there are not many companies, actually, very few companies actually operating into this segment, which I'll talk about later. But this is this industry in a actually very nascent stage. There are a lot of room for the investors to jump in and also offer to something more innovative product, some new design, new features. So Vietnamese definitely can definitely buy and use your so-called bikes. And that is why very few players operating in the market. That is why it is not feasible to capture the potential of the Vietnam market for electric two-wheeler market. So these are the main brands for the Vietnamese two-wheeler market in terms of the electric. So brands like VinFast and Dartbike, they are the hardcore Vietnamese companies, and VinFast among the market leader. Other companies like Pega, Yadia, Dibao, and because they all are from China, but they all have an assembly unit in Vietnam. So as of now, these are the main companies operating into the category of electric two-wheelers, which is at the same time, as I mentioned before, VinFast is the market leader, which is almost like 50% of the market share, followed by Pega, Dibao, Yadia, and other brands. So that shows that we don't have many companies as of now, only two typical Vietnamese company and all of from China. So that shows the potential of the more companies jump in and offer something more innovative in terms of the designing, in terms of the attractive pricing, something more feature in terms of their bikes. So this is a study done by the International Council of the Clean Transportation, which shows that out of every 100 bikes in Vietnam, 8.2 is actually e-bikes. When I say e-bike, it means e-scooter and also the e-motorbike. And that is the highest in terms of the other countries in the Asian region, because when you talk about Philippines or Indonesia or Thailand, all these countries are used a lot of two-wheelers. And but Vietnam is among the highest in terms of the capturing of the e-market in terms of the two-wheeler segment. So that shows the readiness of the market. That shows the Vietnamese are ready to and also accepting the e-bikes as well. As we all know that if we want to use e-bikes, we need to have very strong charging station infrastructure as well. But unfortunately, Vietnam as of now doesn't have very robust infra of the charging stations. So that's why normally people either park at their home or their apartment parking, or also or their maybe they go to any mall or their office parking. They normally charge their two-wheelers. But at the same time, the private players like VinFast and also Dartbike, they have come forward to develop these kind of charging stations. And the typical power capacity which Vietnamese two-wheeler needs is around equal or more than 2.5 kilowatt power, which is pretty okay as per these industry standards. But at the same time, government also has been pushing a lot. That's why government has been talking to many universities across Vietnam to develop the charging ports or charging station in the campus. Because when the kids come to the college, they can charge at the convenience, because we need to have a good space to make these charging stations. And that is why it's good to start with the universities where we have the huge crowd of people who are using two bikes. But at the same time, there's also opportunities for investors to jump into this segment as well, because Vietnam does need help in terms of the building the infrastructure for the charging station as well. Because Vietnam is a big country of a population around close to 98 million. So companies like VinFast, Dartbike, they can't do it alone. They need help as well. Now the thing is, why Vietnam good for this kind of segment or this kind of product? Because Vietnamese love to own bike. They love to ride bike. So you already have a ready client. You already have the market acceptability is there, because they are ready to accept the two-wheeler as one of the transportation mode. Very less player in the market, but they're also leading market in the Asian region. At the same time, Vietnam has got multiple free trade agreements. So Okay, one more thing is that the only way out is that if any investor or any foreign company wants to come into this segment, there's only one way out, is that they have to have an assembly unit in Vietnam. They can't import. I mean, because import is duty is very, very high, so they can't compete with the local player in terms of the pricing. So the only way out is that you need to have your own local manufacturing or local assembly unit in Vietnam. But one thing which you can definitely get out of is that once you have manufacturing unit in Vietnam, you can sell your bikes in Vietnam and also take the benefit of multiple Vietnam free trade agreement, which Vietnam has with the multiple geography in the world, especially EU and also the among the Asian countries. And you can export those, your bikes to different part of the world in a very, very less tariff or maybe zero tariff. At the same time, if we talk about the ASEAN as a region, which is the third largest region in terms of the population after China and India, and being in Vietnam, you can target the entire market of Asian. And trust me, guys, in the Asian region, except Singapore or Malaysia, almost all countries use two-wheeler at a very good level. Philippines, Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, they all are so much used to use two-wheeler. So you already have a ready market in terms of the two-wheeler segment. You only have to convert from the gasoline into the e-bikes. And all the government trying to push this kind of e-bikes into different countries. So once you're in Vietnam, you can take the benefit of the Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, Vietnam government support. In fact, government also trying to support this industry by taking a lot of incentives, like maybe there's a proposal in the Ministry of Finance that they want to curtail the tax and also the registration cost of the Vietnamese electric two-wheeler market, especially for two-wheeler. And also to support in terms of this some kind of incentives to the companies who wants to come and set up their manufacturing units in Vietnam. So government has been trying a lot, and at the same time, there's also an opportunity for those companies who are looking to develop the charging station in Vietnam. Because what you can do, you can probably supply your charging ports or charging stations in Vietnam, and the local Vietnamese party, they can do the installation part. So Vietnam is good for definitely for the electric two-wheeler bikes, and also give you the opportunity to come into the Vietnamese charging station as well in terms of the charging infrastructure. So that is what Vietnam is all about in terms of the Vietnam electric two-wheeler, and that is so this is all about from my side, and this is what I thought. Let me talk about the Vietnamese emerging industries of fintech and electric two-wheeler. If you guys have any more questions, I'm happy to talk to you post in one-to-one. And because I know that because of the time limit, I can't talk everything in detail. So Zach, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Vish. I mean, that was a lot of really, really good and detailed information. So just a reminder, if anyone has questions, just send them in through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. But yeah, we'll move on to our next speaker. Dr. Quinn Tran, who's the commercial counselor and head of the trade office of Vietnam in Ottawa. Dr. Quinn received her BA in international law from Vietnam Institute of International Relations in 1999. She then went on to the Namur University in Belgium, earning an MA in international economics in 2001. Dr. Quinn's a PhD in international relations, earned in development studies from Geneva, and has also served as the assistant to the vice president of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Dr. Quinn was a lecturer in the International Cooperation for Development at the Graduate Institute of Development Studies in Geneva, and has returned following that to Vietnam to begin her career in the Ministry of Industry and Trade, focused on competition and economic integration. Starting in 2007, Dr. Quinn served as the international advisor at the Vietnam Competition Council and was a counselor to Singapore from 2017 to January 2022, and at the same time served as the head of the Vietnam Trade Office in Singapore. In April of 2022, so just last year, Dr. Quinn came to Canada, to Ottawa specifically, as the Trade Commissioner at the Embassy of Vietnam in Canada and head of the Vietnam Trade Office in Canada, and is fluent in both English and French. So Dr. Quinn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jack, for your introduction. So as Jack mentioned, I'm from the Ministry of Industry and Trade. So I will focus my presentation more on industrial sector. And after that, I will give an idea about how Vietnam can be the central of ASEAN can be the gateway for Canadian businesses to enter into ASEAN, and also how Vietnamese companies and Canadian companies can collaborate to reap the benefit from the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. So industry play an important role in Vietnam economy with 12 million of workers. Industrial sector contribute 90% to Vietnam total export, and therefore industry is the engine of the Vietnam economic growth. And during the last 10 years, the index of industrial production grew annually at 10%, contributing 38% to the growth of the whole economy. And this year, Vietnam GDP account for $410 million and have Vietnam to be ranked at the 37th biggest economy of the world. And with this, the growth pace, Vietnam can be among top 30 largest economy in the world by 2025. With this importance, the government tasks us to generate more impulsion for industry to ensure industrial sector continue to be the locomotive of Vietnam's economic growth. To do so, we need to improve the productivity, efficiency, and competitiveness of our production. We also need to help companies to transit sustainably to smart, green, and circular production. In the years to come, we will need to deepen the connection in terms of supply and production between Vietnam and economies that we have signed foreign free trade agreements so far. And our ministry is deploying a lot of measures to develop necessary infrastructure for industrial development, from energy infrastructure to digital trade infrastructure, from logistics to human resources. We have so far successes to develop good industrial infrastructure with a complex of 395 industrial parks and 18 coastal economic zones and 3 high-tech zones. And in 2025, we will have 6 high-tech zones in Vietnam. And investors highly appreciated our industrial performance, and the UNIDO Competitive Industrial Performance Index ranked us at top 3 in ASEAN and 34th in global ranking. We also invest massively in human development with a network of 410 college and 444 intermediate school and more than 1,000 vocational centers. Every year we can offer nearly 4 million new laborers for industry. As for high-tech and ICT, Vietnam is also very competitive country with IT skills ranked 29th in the world and with coding performance ranked number 6. Our IT resources compose of 500,000 laborers, and will be added every year newly graduated students, about 50,000 others from 153 universities in the country. We also offer high-tech training at 300 universities and colleges and can offer every year around 400,000 new laborers in high-tech industry, such as in automation, biomaterial, other high-tech industry. And at our ministry alone, we run 49 colleges and 9 universities to supply labor to electricity, chemical, machinery, etc. Thanks to these efforts, we managed to attract in total $438 billion, about 40 billion annually since the last 5 years. and almost 60% of foreign investment come into manufacturing, as you can see in the picture. So with the newly announced Indo-Pacific strategy, ASEAN is now considered as the center of the Indo-Pacific region. And with the perspective of the Canada-ASEAN Free Trade Agreements to be signed this year, and also the upcoming Canada-ASEAN Strategic Partnership, ASEAN is very important economically to Canada, both in terms of trade and investment. As Vishwas already shared, with 660 million people, ASEAN is the 5th largest economy in the world and the 3rd largest population in the world. And by 2030, ASEAN can occupy up to 16% of worldwide consumption. For now, ASEAN is already the 2nd largest destination for Canadian investment, and ASEAN is the 4th largest trading partners for Canada. And inside ASEAN, Vietnam is Canada's largest trading partner. Vietnam alone is 6th largest trading partner for Canada. And Vietnam is the 2nd largest destination in ASEAN for Canadian agricultural and seafood products. Every year, we send about 20,000 students to Canada, and we spend nearly $1 billion yearly for education in Canada. And we are the 5th largest group of foreign students and number 1st in ASEAN in terms of students studying in Canada. So in terms of human resources and human collaboration, it is a huge potential between our two countries. So with 100 million people and highest economic growth rate in ASEAN, for sure, Vietnam is an attractive destination for international investors, including Canadians. We have a very good ecosystem for startups, as Vishwas already shared. Our logistic development index is improving continuously and positioned just behind Singapore in ASEAN. You can see in the table, the index of Vietnam is 3.3, and for Canada is 3.7 in terms of logistic development. And it is the index registered in 2020 before the COVID. And during the COVID situation, we even improve more our logistic capacity. And also in terms of ICT infrastructure, Vietnam is also a very competitive country in terms of internet subscriber and cellular phone subscriber. And if we think about Vietnam, normally we think about the cuisine, the culinary art of Vietnam, but for tourists, for international tourists, they also remember Vietnam as a very cheap country for internet. And with high-speed broadband, we can also facilitate the e-commerce. And it is an area that we can offer a lot of potential for startup, because we have nearly 60 million of buyers. We account that about 70% of, no, more than 70% of internet users use the internet platform to buy products. And for now, e-commerce represent already nearly 8% of Vietnam total retail market. and it is the second biggest e-commerce market in ASEAN. In terms of location, we also positions at a very strategic location in Indo-Pacific region. With 100 aircraft, Vietnam Airlines is the fourth largest carrier in terms of total number of passengers in ASEAN, and the third largest carrier in terms of total number of fleet in ASEAN. We are actually operating 94 routes with average 400 flights per day. And Vietnam Airlines is ranked 6 years consecutively as a 4-star airlines, and we can offer convenient travel intra-ASEAN for investors from North America. You can see in this table the capacity in terms of ocean shipping with a system of 44 seaports. Since 2020, we have handled annually 22 million TEUs and about 450 million tons of other products, and will be able to handle 47 million TEU by 2030, double the current amount of Singapore. And our deep sea ports are also capable to handle the largest container ship up to 320 DWT. We have up to now established 32 sea lanes, of which 2 routes to North America from Haiphong and 16 others to North America from Saigon. And with 4 NLG ports across the country, we are aiming at offering green energy bunkering services for international ships as well. And with the recent direct shipment between between Vancouver and Haiphong, the shipment time between our 2 countries has been reduced from 30 days to nearly 17 days. And with transshipment via Takoma, Japan. But if we can establish direct shipment between Vancouver and Haiphong, the time to ship from Vancouver to Haiphong will be reduced to 14 days, and it will save a lot for export companies from our 2 countries. With a strategic location and skilled low-cost labor force and good shipping building capacity, we are also offer a good potential to become a leading shipping country in the region, and we will continue to invest to be the most competitive for Trans-Asia transshipment. We also invest a lot in other infrastructure. Actually, we are our investment in infrastructure, in highways and other main infrastructure like airports, seaport, etc., is the highest country in ASEAN with 10% of our GDP. In this table, you can see our demand for investment for different areas from energy, especially in green energy areas. And I do think that Canada is an important provider for us in other areas such as research and development and innovation, etc. In this table, you can see the number of businesses. The perspective of the panorama of businesses in Vietnam and in Canada. In this table, you can see that nearly 99% of our businesses are micro and small and medium companies. And similar to Canada, Vietnam also encouraging our small and medium companies to go international. And we do think that Vietnam can be a very good platform for Canada companies to expand to ASEAN. You can see also that, up to now, Canada is the 14th largest investor in Vietnam with nearly $5 billion US. But in 2020, the trend is very different. You have 9 new projects with a total of $2.2 million US only. That means the size of investment is very small. And it's so the trend of small and medium companies from Canada start to interest into Vietnam and use Vietnam as a platform to expand to ASEAN. In previous slides, I already tried to persuade you that Vietnam has a very good manufacturing and logistic infrastructure. And we also have a very good strategic location in Asia Pacific. We have also a very good and dynamic economy with a large domestic market. But I would like to insist also that our socio-political system is also very stable, as we are a like and homogeneous society. And it is a strong point of Vietnam in comparison to other ASEAN countries. Furthermore, we are also a very high integrated economy with an extensive network of free trade agreements. In this table, I would like to share with you the 17 free trade agreements in force in stage of concluding. In red color are free trade agreement that only Vietnam signed, and in the right hands in the right screen you can see also in red color free trade agreement that Canada have signed so far, and in red color or free trade agreement only Canada is member. So it is an area that our two countries can collaborate to reap the benefits from different free trade agreement platform to expand our products via our production location to reach other geographical location. In this slide, I would like to share with you those emerging industry that I do think that can offer a lot of potential for small and medium companies. In the left side of the screen, green circular economy, new materials, biopharma and digital production, and also high-tech agriculture area that small and medium companies from Canada can get a lot of potential in Vietnam. Of course, so far, a Canadian company still interested in massive infrastructure like highways or high-speed railways or airport, etc. And Canadian investment still trend to focus on real estate and tourism property, and also in finance and banking. But I do think that in areas such as service industry, like e-commerce, digital economy, professional services like Vishwas already suggest you, a lot of potential can open for you. From the perspective of the Ministry of Industry and Trade, we also would like to attract investment in industry supporting global value chains and industry benefiting from foreign free trade agreements like automobile, electronic, semiconductors, other supporting industry for textile, furniture, for in food processing, etc. In this section, I would like to share how we can use the CPTPP to reduce the cost of the goods sold. Of course, we cannot, we cannot, in the red color, the VAT or the GST, the excise duty, etc., are out of the scope of free trade agreements. So we cannot do anything for in this area. But free trade agreement offer a lot of opportunities to reduce the costs, such as the handling costs or the shipping costs, and especially the import duties. How we can reduce the handling costs and shipping costs? Of course, if we can streamline the logistic operation and strategy, and if we can improve efficiency in terms of cross-border operation, for sure we can benefit from the free trade agreements to reduce all these costs. And also, for example, a company from Canada decide to relocate from China or from other countries to Vietnam, they can achieve custom duty saving to lower the cost of goods to sold in Southeast Asia and in Asia Pacific. Many members of the CPTPP already profit from the framework to invest into Vietnam, like the case of Japan and Singapore. Japan and Singapore invest massively during the last 5 years, and a lot of FDI companies from Japan and also from Korea tend to move production lines to Vietnam to use the rule of origin to optimize the production lines. With the relocation, manufacturing companies can also optimize the procurement because they can procure materials with lower costs. And also with the manufacturing location, companies can also save the cost in terms of indirect overheads and labor costs. In this table, I offer 2 exercises to practice, but I don't think that we have enough of time to do. So I will share my slide at a later stage. But in conclusion, yeah, I would like to insist that with the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, we can foster the production ecosystem between our 2 countries. In the last section, I would like to share with you what the Vietnam Trade Office in Canada can do to support Canadian companies to invest into Vietnam or to relocate from other countries to Vietnam? First of all, the Ministry of Industry and Trade, we are governmental agency. We are in charge of state management in a lot of sectors, from electricity, oil and gas, renewable energies, to other industry like mechanical engineering, metallurgy, mining, consumer industry, food industry, supporting industry, even environment industry, and other high-tech industry. And we tasked to support all companies to invest in Vietnam, and also we are tasked to support companies to enter into Vietnam in other area also, like in logistics or in e-commerce, etc. So the Vietnam Trade Office in Canada can help companies to obtain the license or the permits for selling products in Vietnam, for example. We can also help to support companies to solve difficulty and problem while doing business in Vietnam. We also help Canadian companies to identify business opportunities and suppliers and partners in Vietnam through trade mission or through webinar, seminar, etc. We can also help Canadian companies to familiar with trade and investment procedure in Vietnam, and also to identify location for investment destination in Vietnam. As a trade promotion agency as well, we also support Canadian enterprises to participate in trade show and in trade expo in Vietnam, and to enter into domestic market, because we also manage the domestic market of Vietnam. In 2021, we have invited Canada as country of honor at the Vietnam largest exposition, and we have gathered 40 brands from Canada to showcase Canadian brands to Vietnamese customers. And we do hope that more products from Canada and also more companies from Canada can enter into Vietnam and can expand from Vietnam to other ASEAN countries, and via Vietnam to larger scale, like to Indo-Pacific region. And we would like to invite you to access our website and to connect with us via our email address. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Quinn. And again, if anybody has any questions, I see a few have come through already. There is the Q&A button. We'll get to those all at the end. But moving on to our third and final speaker, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jamil Somji, who is the founder and CEO of Spinovation Labs, based here in Ho Chi Minh City, which helps companies prototype and test innovative product ideas in 5 days or less using Google's design thinking methodology. Previously, Jamil helped Manulife build its first innovation lab in Toronto, Canada. And Jamil has over 15 years of experience working in financial services and has taught a product design course in the Master of Engineering, Engineering, Innovation and Entrepreneurship program at Ryerson University in Canada, and is also a CFA charter holder. So Jamil, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Zach. And thanks for the invite. I'm going to share my screen now. Great. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Sounds good. Um, so, hello everyone, Xin Chào. My name is Jamil Somji, and as Zach mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Spinnovation Labs. It's a product design lab, and we help companies design and test new product ideas in 5 days using Google's design thinking method. And here's an example of some of the clients that we've worked with over the last 7 years. Today, I'm going to speak very briefly about my experience running a company in Vietnam, Vietnam's ecosystem for startups, and then my experience as a Canadian living in Vietnam. So yeah, with regards to my experience running a startup in Vietnam, even though I've been around for 7 years as a company, you know, I moved to Vietnam in 2018 because my wife got a job out here. So effectively, you know, I had an established business in Canada, but did not have an established business in Vietnam. So I consider myself a startup in Vietnam. So in 2018, moved to Vietnam and I expanded my product design lab to Southeast Asia. I was able to land 3 big clients, one in the banking sector, really focused on digital payments. The other client was in the life insurance sector. And lastly, the third was in the FMCG sector. I think I'm very grateful for Zach and colleagues at CanCham because, you know, arriving here to Vietnam and negotiating contracts in a foreign country is something that I didn't have experience with, and CanCham actually helped me by putting me in touch with a lawyer to review my contracts and help advise me on the tax policies and how to structure my contracts to make it favorable for myself. And also actually favorable for the companies I was working with. So it was a win-win. So I really appreciate that. And I was thank you, CanCham. In terms of where did I find my human resources? So I sourced, I run a product design lab. So that means I need to hire the following people to help me with my business: UI, UX designers, user researchers, and developers. So I was able to find a plethora of design and development agencies here in Vietnam, which was really helpful. And I landed on 2 agencies. One is called HD Websoft, and the other one is called Reka, both headquartered here in Ho Chi Minh City. They were able to provide me with talent to staff my projects for my clients at a reasonable rate. So at about $25 per hour, US dollars per hour. Given that I work in a relatively new field in terms of like rapid product design, so there is a bit of training required for like UI UX designers that I work with, or user researchers that I work with. So I found that I had to provide some training and oversight to make sure that the talent that I did hire here were successful, my clients. But I found that the talent here, or the resources here in Vietnam, the Vietnamese local Vietnamese talent in the design and tech sector are extremely fast learners. They have very fast turnaround time. Also, their ability to read and write in English are very good. And however, in terms of communicating or verbalizing in English or speaking English, some that I met were good, and some that I met did struggle to speak English well. But those that even struggled to speak English well, we were able to communicate over chat in English quite easily. So communicating wasn't a problem. It wasn't or isn't a problem when I'm working with local talent here in Vietnam. And then working with local Vietnamese businesses, given that Vietnam is one of the fastest growing markets in Southeast Asia, the work style here is extremely fast paced. My clients have a very aggressive growth targets, way more aggressive than I've seen in Canada. in terms of like market penetration and customer growth. Again, I'm working with primarily medium to larger size companies here. So many of the employees that I work with, they do speak English. And if they don't speak English, then we can chat. Or I can also, resort to my trusted Google Translator to help me through situations where we have a communication breakdown. But like communication isn't a barrier for me in my business here. Local Vietnamese companies really like to mobilize quickly around a problem and solve problems extremely quickly. And that's something that I like to do as well. So I've had a very good experience running my business here in Vietnam. And I've also had an opportunity to expand outside of Vietnam to other regions such as like Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong as well. But majority of my business is here in Vietnam. So I want to talk a little bit about the startup ecosystem here. Yeah, so we can talk from from a government perspective. So in 2016, the Prime Minister approved something that's known as Project 844. It's the most direct government intervention. It's a direct government intervention to create a favorable environment for Vietnamese startups. It's overseen by the Ministry of Science and Technology. And also the National Technology Innovation Fund was created in 2015 to attract knowledge organizations, entrepreneurs, and scientists to contribute to economic development and participate in creation of startups. In terms of angel investing, the number of angel investors in Vietnam is still small, but is still increasing. There are local and foreign angel investors, including relatives and friends, with small investments for pre-seed funding. Some of the active angel investors in the country are successful and first generation startup founders as well. In terms of venture capital, the number of VCs operating in Vietnam is quite small, and most are funded by the government. So in 2019, about 40 VC funds were active. Also in 2019, Vietnam attracted about 3% of total venture capital in Southeast Asia. And this share has been increasing to 19% in 2022. I think one drawback about VC funding is that VCs like to invest in startups that are profitable, and they like to invest anywhere from 2 to 5 million. So if you're an early stage startup founder, then it's going to be very difficult for you to access that VC funding. So apart from the angel investors that you have here, which are quite limited, and then the venture capital that's only available to I would say companies that have found product market fit, there is a bit of a gap. So capital is difficult to find for early stage startups. In terms of accelerators and incubators and accelerators are a relatively new concept in Vietnam, and the strong development of the tech startup community has highlighted that their limited capacity. I had a chance to work with the Saigon High Tech Park Innovation Hub and work directly with 4 startups, and I could see that some of the challenges that they were experiencing when it came to finding experts in their field. Being able to maintain a team beyond 6 months because of funding issues, being able to rapidly prototype and test concepts to find product market fit and iterate on that was a challenge for a lot of the startups I've worked with. In terms of university and research institute, universities and research institutes in cooperation with the provincial authorities and central ministries have created startup support units within their universities. And a lot of the startup ideas that we see actually get incubated or created in the university ecosystem. That's where a lot of people get their ideas from, and then they go from there. So I want to talk a little bit about my experience living as a Canadian here in Vietnam. We can talk about accommodation first. Accommodation I live in a condo building that is very similar to what you would see in Toronto, Canada. I pay approximately $1,500 Canadian for a fully furnished 2-bedroom apartment here in, I would say, the heart of Ho Chi Minh City. It's right between District 1 and District 2. So very, very, it's a 10-minute drive from the central business district. So accommodation is quite reasonably priced here. I find the people of Vietnam to be extremely thoughtful, compassionate, beautiful people inside and out. I love the fact that, the Vietnamese, they addressed each other as brother and sister, even if you're a stranger. And that's something that really warms my heart. And I think something we can all live by in Canada or learn from Canada. Yeah, very tight-knit group of people, people are just here, lovely hearts and eager to help. I have a family, as you can see here on the screen, just my wife and myself, and then our 2.5-year-old. So my 2.5-year-old goes to an international school here, and it's called Saigon Kids, and it's a really great school for him. We've seen him develop really well. And I think one drawback is I guess the cost of the private school is around like maybe $14,000 Canadian a year. But that price actually will go up as someone, as the child advances to more at higher grade levels as well. And then in terms of healthcare, they have good private healthcare here for non-complex health issues. However, if you had a really complex health issue, you may have to go to Thailand or Singapore to get treated. But I mean, for touch wood, we haven't had anything major happen to us, but we've had no problems finding doctors here, handling emergencies, either with anyone in our family or with our baby. It's actually been quite a pleasant experience, and the ability to be able to make a phone call in the morning and have an appointment within 2 hours is something that is amazing and something we can't get in Canada. So that was quite nice. I live in Ho Chi Minh City. It's quite a bustling city. It's a city that's super vibrant, never sleeps. It's actually my favorite city to live in. I've lived in many different cities like Paris, Ottawa, and also Nairobi, and visited multiple cities, but it is one of my favorite places to live. I think some drawbacks about living, I guess, where I'm living in Ho Chi Minh City, is that pollution levels can be quite high. As mentioned before, the traffic can be, with so many motorbikes on the road, the traffic is quite, I would say, insane at times. It's difficult to cross the road, but I've learned how to do that. But I think this is what you can bound to expect this in living in an emerging economy. And a lot of these challenges I'm just mentioned can be turned into opportunities as well. We've been away from home for about 4 years now, but every quarter CanCham is organizing cool events like you're seeing here. They did a Canada event. So it's always nice to have to be part of the CanCham family. And to feel, a little taste of home with their events. So that's, us involved at the attending the CanCham Canada event here in Ho Chi Minh City. And then here's a picture of me and my son visiting the zoo here in Ho Chi Minh, which is really my son loves. So that's a little bit of a glimpse into my life here in Vietnam. I've had a great experience, and I want to thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Jamil. Very, very well said. Yeah, and thank you, all three of you, for some very insightful presentations. I think covered a lot of important territory, both on the business aspect, but also the living here aspect. So with that, we'll move right into Q&A. I see we've got a couple that have come through. Again, for anyone listening, if you've got a question, just fire it through in the Q&A button. First one here, it says, compared to Indonesia, Vietnam is the second largest e-commerce market in ASEAN. Is that true? So I don't know, I'll turn that over to whoever wants to take a stab.
Yes, I think because Vietnam is one of the leading market for e-commerce. I mean, this is just after Indonesia in the Asian region because of the massive population of Vietnam. And also, as I mentioned before, that Vietnamese love to be on the internet. So when you have a huge population and also tech-savvy population, you have a place for the e-commerce. So yes, it's true that after Indonesia, Vietnam is number two in terms of the e-commerce in the Asian region for sure.
Perfect. Okay, I don't know, Quinn or Jamil, do you have anything to add to that? No?
I agree with Vishwas. Vietnam is among the fastest growing e-commerce economies. I think in terms of users and buyers via e-commerce platform, in terms of total number, Vietnam can be the second biggest in ASEAN in terms of total number of users.
Perfect. Another one here. What incentives are in place to invest in a startup in Vietnam? Are there any incentives or, I guess, benefits that come with investing here?
May I answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think for startups, they're depending on the industry to industry because government of Vietnam is open for new ideas for sure. But Dr. Quinn probably can probably bring more light on this. But I think, as of my knowledge, Vietnam doesn't have any so-called specific incentive for startups, but they're open depending on the industry and also what actually you're going to do in Vietnam in terms of improving the Vietnam economy and also the country overall. But government of Vietnam definitely open for new opportunities, new incentives, so new investments into different industry. But that is depending on the case to case.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Another one, if I invest in a startup, sorry here, do you qualify for a work permit and or residency if you create a startup or move your startup to Vietnam? Maybe Jamil, that would be when you could speak from a personal experience, but I think the answer is yes.
Actually, I'm not sure because I am working here as I got a visa through my wife because she's the one that actually came here to Vietnam. So I'm not too sure about how that works. So I'm not sure if Dr. Quinn might have some insight into that.
I think to that answer question, that I think once you have a company in Vietnam and if you're a founder, you can always get a investor visa, because right now I'm having an investor visa, which is depending on 1 year to 2 year, depending on the amount of capital you are going to invest in Vietnam. But it's very easy process. It doesn't take much time, and it's not very tedious process. It just take probably, I think, 2 or 3 weeks time to get your investor visa. It's pretty smooth process.
Perfect. Excuse me. I have another one here saying we have a cookware business in Vietnam. Is there opportunity for that in the Canadian market? Well, probably. I know just a lot of Vietnamese exports last year, I believe, hit 11 billion US dollars to Canada, ranging from everything from garments and textiles to agriculture and seafoods to equipment. So I think for sure there's definitely some opportunities for cookware exports to Canada. I don't know if Quinn, maybe if you'd have any thoughts on that.
Sorry, can you repeat again? I did not follow.
We had somebody asking, they manufacture cookware in Vietnam, and they're asking if there's opportunity to export to Canada. So maybe a good idea for them to contact the Vietnam Trade Office.
Yeah, so, yeah, it is effectively our task to promote our export to Canada, and cookware is also an area that myself I think that there are a lot of potential. When I was head of Vietnam Trade Office in Singapore, cookware and tableware are the top 2 priority products that our office offer services to Vietnamese companies. And of course, with my new tour of duty in Canada, I'm very pleased to support cookware companies from Vietnam to introduce yeah, very high brands cookware from Vietnam, like Minh Long, or like other ceramic products from Vietnam to Canada.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions come through, and it is almost 9:30 here. So it's been a long hour and a half. I know a lot of information shared. That being said, we'll definitely follow up to all the attendees with the presentations, if we have the speaker's permission to do so, as well as a recording of this webinar will be available on our website, social media, etc. So I really want to thank you, Vish, Jamil, and Dr. Quinn for your time and insights this morning, and of course to thank Leaps and Bounds again for sponsoring today's event.
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, if anybody has any follow-up questions or wants to connect with any of the speakers, just send us an email. I'm happy to make those introductions where we can. And I'd also just recommend people subscribe to the CanCham newsletter or follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook. For any upcoming events. I think we'll have a lot more webinars and things like that this year, especially as 2023 does mark the 50 years of diplomatic relations between Canada and Vietnam. So again, really want to thank our speakers and everybody for joining today. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to you, everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.